طيب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. The author Al-Hafidh Al-Shawkani rahimahullah, he says in the book of marriage, ومن كان له زوجان فصاعدا عدل بينهن في القسمة وما تدعو الحاجة إليها. And whoever has two or more wives should be just. عدل بينهن في القسمة. He should be just with regards to the separation and division of time. The separation and division of time. وما تدعو الحاجة إليها, and anything else which is a need. Anything else which is a need. Whatever that need may be, the man should try his best to be just and be fair and be equal between them. Or a better translation is not necessarily equal, but fair. The author, he says, adala, fairness, justice. And we have explained that fairness and equality, justice and equality are sometimes parallel and sometimes they are not parallel. Every time there's justice or fairness doesn't mean that there has to be equality. There are certain people who deserve more. There are certain people who earn more. There are certain people who have more, have less, etc. in the Sharia. So we're talking about a man and a woman. The rulings of a man versus the man of a woman. There's always justice. There's always fairness. But there isn't always equality. Sometimes a woman gets more. Sometimes a man gets less. Sometimes a man has more responsibilities. Sometimes a woman has more responsibilities, etc. So being just between the wives if you have two or more. Obviously, in 2019, and even in the time of the Prophet, in certain situations, but especially in our times, there are many things which are unconventional, and there are many things which are unorthodox, and there are many situations which demand and necessitate flexibility, if there's a chance for them to work. If there's a chance for them to work. As far as if there is no chance for it to work, then obviously a situation which is unorthodox, in which there's no flexibility and maneuverability, there's going to be a problem, like a tree, or like a building. If you look at really strong trees, oftentimes you see them swaying in the wind. The branches, the arms, it sways a little bit, or you can shake it just a little bit, but the wood is solid. And if it was 101% stiff, then it would crack and break off faster with a strong, violent wind. And the concept applies to civil engineering and the construction of buildings. They make the building with some type of ability to do what? Just a bit. You don't necessarily see it. It's steel, but they construct it like that. And if there's no flexibility in light of imperfect weather, then of course it's going to be a problem. As far as if you live in a place or a town in which there's no wind whatsoever, no rain whatsoever, it's indoors, you have no issue. You have no issue. But certain things that you can't necessarily predict or count on, or certain things you can't estimate or guess what will happen, when it will happen, how long, how strong it will happen, there needs flexibility. So all of this pertains to the concept of Zawajul Misyar. Zawajul Misyar, the Misyar marriage, which is a topic of great discussion today. And when a woman waives some of her rights, a woman waives some of her time, a woman demands certain things but relinquishes other things. Now, many people, they say, no, this is haram. This cannot be done. You cannot marry a woman. She says, just see me once a year. Just see me 3 times a year. See me once a month. See me once a week. You don't have to pay any of my bills. Buy me, take care of anything. Just come see me. Or only pay the cable bill. I have the cell phone myself. You don't have to worry about my cell phone. Pay the cable bill. I waive some of my rights. Okay? Some ulama and some researchers, they say this is impermissible. And this is a doorway and a gateway to mut'ah, and a doorway and a gateway to zina, and a doorway and a gateway to playing around with Allah's hudud. وَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا آيَاتِ اللَّهِ هُزُوًا. Allah says, do not take His ayat as jest, as mockery. And that's in Surah Al-Baqarah, talking about the verses of marriage and divorce. So some ulama and some researchers, some bahithin, they hold that view. And others, they say, bel, on the opposite, on the contrary. Zawajul Misyar is nothing in the Kitab and the Sunnah to state that it is false, impermissible, and invalid. It does not have to be a gateway to zina or mut'ah, but is a relationship based off of honesty, transparency, and agreement between a Muslim man and a Muslim woman. Of course, she has a wali, etc., in which she does not demand everything which is conventional and orthodox of the rights, whether it be qisma, equal nights and days, or equal nights, whether it be nafaqah, wealth, and other things like this. She could waive the right of having children, such as a woman who can't have children, and she needs to be married, and there's no one that she can find to get married. She says, listen, I can't bear you children, so therefore, you don't have to take care of me 100%, because I know that I can't give you everything that you're looking for, or your schedule of work, of time, of travel, whatever. You may have a medical condition that prevents you from being there every night. Whatever the case is, in which it's better for these Muslims to be married and waive certain rights and responsibilities, not all of them, versus them remaining single, thinking, fantasizing, falling into things, not being married, etc., etc. So therefore, al-adl, justice, is oftentimes based off of what is agreed upon. If this brother agrees upon this sister agrees upon that, and anything extra that comes, alhamdulillah. And they can live in harmony for that, then alhamdulillah. And oftentimes you may find a more harmonious marriage with that, with regards to people who have the day-to-day 9-to-5 orthodox marriage and relationship. So it's wisdom in all of these things. What's important is if you have 2 wives or more, the author says, you have to be just with the qisma, وَمَا تَدْعُ الْحَاجَةُ إِلَيْهَا, and anything else which is needed, such as money, such as support, and anything else. All right? Those are the rules. And of course, there has to be, in certain times and places, flexibility. Wallahu alam. The author then says, وَإِذَا سَافَرَ أَقْرَعَ بَيْنَهُنَّ, and whenever a man wishes to travel, he has to, or he should decide and pick who he's going to take with him based off of blind justice. And that is with al-qur'a, with drawing straws. Or we say what? Rock, paper, scissors, right? In which you have, you know what drawing straws are? Straws of wheat. Everyone picks one, he breaks it off, you put it in your hand and they pull one. In other words, you pick who's going to go with you. So it's not always she's coming with me, or this one is going to go with me. But it should be based off of blind justice. Blind justice. Everyone understand this? We did rock, paper, scissors. You picked the rock, she picked the what? The scissors, she picked the paper. Khalas, you have to pick who comes. Everyone understand this? So this is a prophetic way. The Prophet ﷺ used to do this. And that is, if you can't take every single wife with you, and you wish to take one, you be just. So this one made Umrah with me. Then next year I go make Umrah. I pick again if I have 4. Or I have 2, and the next one will come with me. Or if your wives get along, and if they live in harmony, and they can be with each other in harmony without fighting and fussing and jealousy and the other problems, you take both of them. If you can afford that. If you can afford that, okay? And if you can't afford it, and if you don't wish to take both of them, or they don't have good chemistry, they can't get along, or whatever the case may be, then you take one based off of justice as well. This issue here, the issue of pulling strings, it also shows us, and Allah knows best, is that something being based off of chance is not necessarily haram. It's not necessarily haram just because it's chance. We were talking about the issue of dice, right? Is it permissible to shoot dice? Is it permissible to play Monopoly with dice? Can you use dice for a game, okay? And many people say you can't. And that's because it is a min al-maysir. It's a game of, it's gambling, it's chance. It's from the ansab and the azlam, all right, etc. It's a chance. Like the things of jahiliyyah, and anything that pertains to chance is haram. That's not necessarily consistent with regards to this. Whereas this woman is pulling a straw, there's no skill involved, correct? There's no knowledge involved beforehand. It's sheer what? Just luck, as they say. Linguistically speaking. She got the shorter one, she got the longer one. Just like something as a what? A dice. Or you throw dice, you roll the dice. You don't know, the dice of course aren't fixed. You don't know what you're gonna get, and you take a chance. So the concept of backgammon in Al-Islam, the concept of games that have or involve some type of chance, yani if you say that that's the illah, the reason why it's haram, then it has to be what? Consistent. Unless you make an exception. And you have to have clear proof that it's an exception to the rule. Allah Azza wa Jalla surely knows best. Moving forward. He then says, وَلِلْمَرْأَةِ أَن تَهَبَ نَوْبَتَهَا أَوْ تُصَالِحَ الزَّوْجَ عَلَى إِسْقَاطِهَا. And a woman has the permissibility, she has the option of donating and gifting her night to her co-wife. Gifting or donating her night to her co-wife. Okay? She can also make peace and amends with the husband to say, you don't have to give me no night whatsoever. I don't need no night from you whatsoever. Both are permissible. Okay? There's another sister, she says, give her my night, tafaddal. Give her my month, give her my year, give her my weekend, give her my 3 days, tafaddal, no problem. Because she's sick, or you're going through something, or I'm going through something, and I need some space, I need some time, right? Or a husband says, I don't want to be in this marriage no more, it's too much for me, it's too much drama, it's too much money, it's too much, whatever the case may be. She says, don't divorce me, you don't have to give me no nights. Everyone understands? He says that this is permissible. And of course, this being permissible, or this working, is going to be based off of situation and based off of circumstance. And this proves the previously stated theory of what? Flexibility. There is not always A or B or 1 plus 1. There has to be room for maneuvering if you want it to work sometimes. Moving forward. ويقيم عند الجديدة البكر سبعا والثيب ثلاثا. And when a man marries a new wife, if she's a virgin, then he is to give her 7 nights. 7 nights. And if she isn't a virgin, she was married before, or she has children, then he gives her 3 nights. I.e., from the cycle, the qisma. So a man, he has one wife, and he goes home to that wife every night. He marries a new wife who is a virgin. He is to spend 7 nights with her without coming back. And if she isn't a virgin, then 3 nights. And if a man has 3 other wives, and he marries a 4th wife, instead of every other night or 2 nights or whatever the agreement is, he gives that new virgin wife 7 nights. And the non-virgin wife, 3 nights. As a means of bringing her into the marriage and giving her the necessary time and affection, etc. etc. Moving forward. He says, وَلَا يَجُوزُ الْعَزْلُ. And it's unlawful to make al-azl, to withdraw and to climax and ejaculate outside of the vagina. It's impermissible. The author says that cannot be done. You cannot withdraw and pull out. It says in the footnotes here, Al-azlu naz'u ba'd al-ilaj liyunzila kharij al-farj. وقد جزم المصنف هنا بتحريم العزل لكنه رجع عنه في السيل فذهب إلى أن أحاديث الباب المبيحة والمانعة يمكن الجمع بينها وذلك بحمل أحاديث النهي على التنزيه وانظر بحثا متينا في المسألة في المغني مساد المعادي والفتح. The editor says that the author clearly says it's haram to do this. And he says that in another book, he retracted this statement. He took back this madhab. And the reason why he had the view that it's impermissible in the beginning is that there are hadiths that prohibit it. There are hadiths which prohibit a man. And if a man is having intercourse with his wife, he must climax within his wife. And he cannot do it outside. Okay? Out of fear that she will become pregnant. He cannot do this. And there are many narrations regarding al-wad'atu sughra. This is like burying the child, burying the girl baby, a minor version of it. So the editor, he says that the author explains in another book is that the hadiths that prohibit it and the hadiths which allow it, yumkinu al-jam'u baynaha. We can harmonize between them. And that it's disliked to do it. And that if a man is having intercourse with his wife, he should ejaculate and climax inside of his wife. And it should not be outside. طيب. Another issue that pertains to this in our modern times is the use of contraceptives. Even though contraceptives are not necessarily new. They're not new. The concept isn't new. Having a woman that you're sleeping with and fearing her becoming pregnant, that's not a new thing. All right, that's very old. As we see here, and even in civilizations many years before the Arabs and before the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Just like birth control. And the concept of a pregnancy test. You read about the ancient Egyptians. They had a scientific method for determining if a woman was pregnant or not. And the shocking thing is that it's very similar to pregnancy tests today. All right, they had a specific way of determining a woman was pregnant through urination, and there were certain things that would have a woman who feels or assumes that she's pregnant to urinate on, and if that crop or that plant would grow, or if it turned to color, then they knew that things were different in her system and she was pregnant. So it isn't necessarily a new thing, a novel, a modern day thing, but the technological advances, the medical advances, the convenience, the simplicity, of course, we know in our modern times. So therefore, with regards to using contraceptives, is it permissible for a man to be married to a woman and to use protection? Is that permissible? Or is that a means of running from having a child and that you have to put your trust in Allah? You have to put your trust in Allah. Is that permissible? What is the etiquette of a person saying, I don't want to get married for 2 years? Is that permissible? Okay. Birth control pills, things like this. What they call it, the IUD, things like this. A woman, she gets certain things inserted into her. Is that permissible? Can you expose your aura to prevent yourself from getting pregnant? All of those things pertain to al-azl. And also the haqq, the right of a free woman. Obviously, it's not an Islamic place of legislation. Most people married are free one way or another. Okay, they're slaves of other things, of desires, of alcohol, drugs, the internet, credit cards, but they're not in the bondage of a one specific man. They may be in bondage of other men, unfortunately, or other women, people who control and run things in the world. What's important is, can you get married and say, we're not going to have kids for 2 years? And the wife says, I want a baby right now. I don't want to wait 2 years. If I have a child, it's the qadr of Allah. If we get divorced, it's the qadr of Allah. But the husband says, I don't want to be divorced. I want to have at least 2 years and I want to have some time with you alone, etc. All of these rulings pertain to what? Al-azl. And is it or is it not permissible? And this also goes to show us, as we have explained, walillahi alhamd, in other classes, is that the scholars of Islam have spoken on affairs of sexuality. Everyone understand this? It wasn't something which was hidden to them. And it wasn't something that they did not talk about. As many people who may suffer from short vision or narrow minds or fake piety or cultural dominance may say, oh, you can't give a talk. How can you give a class about sexual etiquette? That's disgusting. That's horrible. Oh, you can't talk like that, brother. These words shouldn't be mentioned in the masjid, brother. Or this is too raw, brother. Or you can't say that, brother. Nah. Or you're being lewd and nasty, brother. It doesn't mean that. Everyone understand this? The ulama of Islam, they spoke about these things. And that's because sex is a part of life. And life is based off of Islam. Every single thing that can happen in life, you'll find the ruling of it mentioned in Al-Islam. And we've explained this and we've given these introductions and how they are very important. And most people who say things like this, they either lack knowledge of the deen, of the sunnah, and of the kutub al-fiqh, or they have fake piety. They're acting like they're pious and righteous, but they themselves have all types of sexual perversions in their own personal lives. Or perhaps some brothers, they may find it disgusting to know the proper do's and don'ts and etiquette of being with your wife. As we say, some brothers, they may be what? Eunuchs, or allergic to being with a woman. In which when they hear the word, it's like, oh, how could you say that, brother? You have to know. If you want to get married, you have to know what to do and how to do to please Allah Azza wa Jal, first and foremost. You have to know that. You have to know the basics of the rulings of hygiene. You have to know the basic rulings of the halal and haram in the bedroom. And also you have to know how to be a husband that pleases your wife and protects your wife from haram and from zina and protect yourself. All right? And Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions in the Quran, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. Those who preserve their furuj, with two interpretations, meaning they cover physically, they cover their private parts physically, meaning men that don't wear tight clothes and transparent clothes, brothers wearing tight things, tight pants, all right, wearing sheer things, showing your private area, short shorts and things like this. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. They protect their private parts, the literal outward sense. And the second interpretation that the ulama of Islam mentioned وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ يعني من الوقوع فيما لا يحل, from falling into anything which is impermissible. And some of the scholars of Islam, they say that this verse means not only do they protect themselves, but they protect their wives from zina. They protect their wives from zina. And that is proven that when a man does not suffice himself with the halal and he goes towards the haram, in most cases his wife will go towards it as well. And that's because when he has a taste of the haram and a passion for the haram, he has less of an appetite for the halal. And if she's not being pleased sexually, it's a big chance that she'll fall into something which is impermissible herself. So it's not that simple. And many men are selfish. It says, well, I don't care about that. I don't need that. I don't need to be with my wife more than once a month. That's it. Once a week. I'm not a savage. You're a savage. Are you an animal? And they don't even realize that their wife is looking at things haram, practicing things haram, lusting over men in a haram way because she's not being pleased. And that's because a person does not know the Islamic etiquette or the other ways, the other things that are not haram with regards to having a healthy relationship in Al-Islam. Are we understanding this? So it is extremely important, especially in 2019. What? Especially in 2019. And the same applies to fathers with regards to your son and your daughter who goes to college. What does your son see at college? My son doesn't need to get married right now. Oh no, he's fine. My son is not thinking about that. From the time the son goes to the train, the bus, until he comes home, it's nothing but what in his face? Uncovered women. Your daughter, everything that she sees this basketball player, she sees this rapper, she sees this handsome guy, this person like this one wearing this person talking like that, all day, every day. She has no desires. Your daughter's 19 years old, she has no sexual desires whatsoever. Shaitan doesn't come across her. It doesn't come to her path. She's not, getting married is not important for her. This is the delusional thoughts of many parents. And they don't realize that they are responsible for the haram that their children are falling into, for not marrying them off and not allowing them to get married. This does not mean that you rush recklessly into marriage. We're not saying that. It does not mean that you don't teach your children responsibility and how to respect marriage. We're not saying that. But there is a balance. And if your child is 18 and 19 and they're totally giggly and immature and they don't know nothing about life and birds and bees at all, how have you raised your son? How have you raised your son? If your daughter is totally unsuited to get married, she's 20 years old, 19, what type of woman did you raise? And what purpose did you raise her for? So we have to be mindful of these things as Muslims, and we cannot be bewildered from the reality that is in front of us. I'm going to understand this. And the ulama of Islam, they're the best example of this. The author, he then says, وَلَا إِتْيَانُ الْمَرْأَةِ فِي دُبْرِهَا, nor is it lawful for a man to enter his wife through her anus. It's unlawful to have anal sex in Islam. The author clearly specifies that it is unlawful. It cannot be done. What are the wisdoms? What are the reasons behind that? The author does not mention them, but he says that it must be vaginal. It cannot be anal. Another issue that pertains to this is the commonly asked question of oral sex. Many Muslims around the world, in the East and the West, they ask about al-jima' al-famawi or al-jima' al-shafawi. They ask about oral sex. Is it permissible for a man to practice or a woman to practice oral sex? Some of the ulama of Islam say that oral sex is unlawful and it cannot be done. And many of them, they have different reasons behind them taking this view. From that is they say that it's an imitation of dogs, imitation of animals. And animals, a Muslim is not to imitate. The Prophet ﷺ has forbade us from praying like a rooster, praying like a crow, naqrat dik. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ has prohibited us from praying like a dog, laying flat like a dog, and things like this. Okay, so they say it's impermissible to imitate these animals that have contact with their sexual organs. Tayyib. And he also says imitation of the kuffar. And it did not come from the lands of the Muslims and the way of the Muslims. And some ulama even go as far as saying, how can one recite the Quran? How can you recite the words of Allah and you put your mouth in a place in where urine and other things come out of? So, kayf hada? It's unbefitting of the mouth of the believer to be in such a dirty and filthy place. Tayyib. Khairan, inshaAllah. And other ulama and researchers, they hold the opposite view. And they say that there's no prohibition against it. And the scholars have explicitly mentioned the impermissibility of anal sex. And that leaves vaginal sex and anything else. And the Prophet ﷺ, when his wives were menstruating, we know that he would tell them to put on the nizar. فَيُبَاشِرُنِي. He would come with me, lay with me, touch me, etc. And the permissibility of touching and enjoying anything of your wife, which is فوق الإزار, above the izar. So that's an issue of khilaf among the ulama of al-Islam. Is it permissible to enjoy all sex in al-Islam? Some say yes, some say no. Both sides have their view. Whatever view you feel is the safest and makes the most sense to you and the most correct, then that's what you should follow. But don't force your opinion upon others. Forcing someone to say that it is permissible, or forcing someone to say that it isn't permissible. And make sure that if you're basing it off of cultural norms, that's fine. But make sure you're living in Nigeria, or make sure that you're living in Zimbabwe. Make sure that you're living in China, or whatever other culture in which it is against. If you're living in the United States, UK, Canada, Australia, it's a different what? Huge different story, in which a person is surrounded by all of these haram things. And a person who migrated to Australia, or a person who left this country says, oh, that's impermissible, that's filthy in my country and my customs. Jazakallah khairan. We're not in Zimbabwe. We're not in Nigeria right now. Nor do we live in Palestine. This is New York City. Okay? If it's not clearly proven to be haram in the Kitab and the Sunnah, then that's one thing. In Palestine, one may say you can't do it because of the customs, or Zimbabwe, whatever the country is, but not because of the hardcore Kitab and Sunnah. Okay? But you live in a different place, and there's no proof from the Quran and Sunnah saying it is haram, and it isn't against the customs, you may have to what? Recalibrate your thoughts. You may have to recalibrate your thoughts. And Allah Azza wa Jalla surely knows best. Moving forward, he says, فَصْلٌ فِي وَلِيمَةِ الْعُرْسِ وَالْوَلِيمَةُ لِلْعُرْسِ مَشْرُوعَةٌ وَإِجَابَتُهَا وَاجِبَةٌ مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ فِيهَا مَا لَا يَحِلُّ. He then speaks on the next section, which is the walima, the marital feast, or the feast of the marriage. First and foremost, he says, walimatul urs. He says, walimatul ursi mashru'a, is that it's legislated, it's legal, it's valid. Meaning, he does not state that it's obligatory. The author does not state that having a walima is mandatory, but it's a good, preferable thing to do. What's the wisdom of the walima? Scholars of Islam say several wisdoms. Number one is to manifest your gratefulness to Allah for getting married, and to manifest your happiness, and to bring joy and harmony, and to unite the Muslims upon food, which is a recommended thing in the Sunnah, and to announce and to publicize that you're married, following the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ at the end of the day. Another very important point is that the walima, just like the mahar, people should avoid going extreme and being extravagant and being wasteful and falling into becoming spendthrifts. Obviously, those things are relative. Honoring your guest, the hadith clearly states that. And the hadith also warns us against extravagance. So there's a balance based off of the time, the place, the means, and the culture. If you have the money, you have the means, alhamdulillah, no issue. People are going to eat the food, the Muslims are going to eat the food, alhamdulillah. But you really don't have that much money. You really can't afford a big, grand walima. And that is a thing which is holding you back from getting married. Now there's a what? It is an issue now. And the same applies to the mahar. All right? So it's very important for us to be mindful of not showing off and being extravagant. And unfortunately, many people, they have these big grand walimas, and then a month later or 2 months later, they're divorced. Oftentimes people have these big grand walimas, and they don't really want it. They're not happy, but they're just doing it to make the people happy. Because my father said so, or my customs. You have to have this big grand walima. You have to. Your brother did it. This one did it. It's disgrace. We have to show the people that we're generous. We have to show the people that we will give them a big, gigantic plate of rice. We can't just be cheap, and we can't be. The people that have the culture and the custom on their mind more than the Kitab and Sunnah. That's unfortunate upon us all. We have issues of replying or responding to the invitation to the walima. He says, وَإِجَابَتُهَا وَاجِبَةٌ, and it is mandatory to respond. You have to go to the walima, as long as nothing haram is taking place. As long as nothing haram is taking place. Something haram taking place, you are allowed to retract yourself and not to go. Whatever that haram thing may be. Issues of free mixing, issues of music, unlawful food, whatever it may be, which is ma la yahillu. You don't have to necessarily go. Faslun fil walad lil firash. And that's another discussion right there with regards to, in 2019, how many different things take place and happen at a walima, which may not be permissible. Okay, this one comes, she's not a Muslim. This brother, this family member, he's off the side smoking a cigarette. Uncle, what's his name? Azra. He's on the side smoking, lighting up, you know. He has on his suit, right? His suit and tie. Congratulations. He sits, he eats a little bit, and afterwards he needs to smoke. Yeah, you know, a couple cigarettes outside. Okay? Or this sister, she comes, an auntie or a cousin, Allahu Alam on top of the hijab she's wearing, right? High heel shoes, this crazy type of cone on top of her head, this type of color. This is a reality. Everyone in your family does not what? Wear what? Niqab and gloves. Let's keep it real. You can act like that. You can talk about other people. You can call masjid a deviant masjid. Oh, they're not Salafi. But your own family, as we've said before, how Salafi is your family? Huh? How Salafi is your uncle, who's still a Sufi? What dawah have you given to him? Your father that doesn't make the 5 daily prayers. Where's your wala and your bara? Everyone understand this? So we have to be mindful of this. The Eid, Jum'ah, you see people come in dressed all types of ways. And the strangest, craziest thing that I personally have seen, especially here in New York City, other locations are different, but I'm talking about New York City, Queens, New York, this neighborhood, you find brothers, full beard, trimmed mustache, Saudi thobe, high, trimmed up, kufi, talking about people, refuting people, and then you see the brother leaving the masjid for Taraweeh, or coming for Taraweeh or the Eid, and his wife has on 5 different colors, high heel shoes, and some crazy type of overgarment. Her face is not covered, her gloves are not covered. So you sit there and you ask yourself the question, if this person's a deviant for doing this, and he's a deviant for going here for speaking, and he's a deviant for saying this, and blah, 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 how Salafi is your wife? If Imam Ahmed was walking down the street right now on the Van Wyck, and he saw my wife covered up, and he saw your wife covered up, who would he say is from the Firqa Najiyah? Who do you think? You understand this? How much harshness have you shown to your wife? How much have you declared your wife to be the innovator? Because most of her friends are all what? They're not Salafi. They don't dress Salafi. They don't practice Salafi. Many of them don't even pray. So the hypocrisy of some brothers, and they use so much harshness on a stranger and someone that has nothing to do with their life and their hellfire and their paradise, and they'll neglect their own wives and their own daughters. And am I making this up? You go to college, you go to the Eid, you say, whoa, what is going on? Well, I thought you were, big beard, high thobe. And look at your wife walking down the street like that. So we have to be far from hypocrisy, brothers. Okay? We have to avoid this. All right? And bashing other people, running other people to the ground for these fiqh issues. And we have no type of jealousy, hatred, al-wala wal-bara, nothing when it comes to the women that are in my own household, my daughter and my wife. I do not enjoin the good and forbid the evil upon her. But it's my responsibility to enjoin the good and forbid the evil and to call people bad names and negative names who live in a different state or different masjid. Who do you think Allah is going to ask you about first on Yawm al-Qiyamah? So that's advice. And those who hear, let them take heed. And Allah surely knows best. So going to Walima and there are haram things there, is it a percentage? Or nothing haram, and then you're allowed to go? Wallahu a'lam. We have to be mindful of that in our modern times. The last section of Kitab al-Nikah that we'll read tonight, before Kitab al-Talaq, the book of divorce, the author says, Faslun fil waladi lil firash, wal waladu lil firash, ولا عبرة بشبهه بغير صاحبه وإذا اشترك ثلاثة في وطء أمة في طهر ملك كل واحد منهم فيه فجاءت بولد وادعوه جميعا فيقرع بينهم ومن استحقه بالقرعة فعليه للآخرين ثلث الدية. Very interesting chapter or subchapter. He talks about children, legitimate versus illegitimate children. And the concept of the child belongs to the bed. The child belongs to the bed. Listen carefully. It says in the footnotes, أي لمالك الفراش وهو الزوج والمولى والمرأة تسمى فراشا لأن الرجل يفترشها. He says, listen carefully. Alhamdulillah, we've explained this and we've attempted to clarify the misconceptions that many brothers and sisters have about this terminology. Child of the bed. He says, أي لمالك الفراش. He says the child belongs to the owner of the bed. The owner of the bed. And the owner of the bed is one or two men. It is either the husband or the master. Huh? I don't understand this. The husband what? Or the master. Huh? Tayyib, the husband or the master. He says, and a woman is called a bed. That's the name that she's given. And that's because a man, he lays upon her, he lays with her, he sleeps with her as if she's a what? A bed, a cover, a comforter, a duvet, whatever you want to call it. And she was look at al-Arabiyyah here. He says, so the master of the what? Of the bed, the owner of the bed. So as if because this woman is married to this man, he now what? Owns her. Yamlikuha. Obviously, you're not talking about you doing whatever you want to do and making her your slave, but you get the point I'm trying to make. She's in marriage with him. Everyone understands? He's responsible for her. He's looking after her. So therefore, the legitimate child, the child of halal, of marriage, is called the child of the bed. Not like how many people say the illegitimate child is the child of the bed. That's wrong. And I've heard so many people say this before. All right? The bastard child, the illegitimate child, the child of jahiliyyah or whatever is not the child of the bed. The child of the bed is the child that comes from nikah. Everyone understand this? Or concubinage, as he mentions here. Lawful, something that's lawful. طيب. وَلَا عِبْرَةَ بِشَبَهِ بِغَيْرِ صَاحِبِهِ. He says if the child does not look like the father, that means nothing. It's easy to read now. But when you have a son, and the son looks nothing like you, nothing like you, he has no features of you, Shaitan may what? You're like, what's going on? Oh, mashallah, he look. Mashallah. Your family members, they want to come and say he looks like you, he has your eyes. But the boy doesn't look anything like you. The boy grows up, he develops, and he has none of your features. Now, what do you do, or what do you say if the child looks like what? Brother, what was his name again? Hazra. That's a mushkila now. He has his nose, his ears, his lips, his complexion. Shaitan can what? Can play with your mind, all right? The author says, wala ibra. If he doesn't look like you, then that means what? That means nothing. As long as that woman was your firash. You didn't pay attention to the word in. As long as she was what? Your firash. And the scholars of Islam, they also mention the time period with regards to how long or how possible it is for a woman to be pregnant, to get pregnant. If you traveled away from her. With regards to the male's fluid. That in light of medical science and modern science. How long a woman can be pregnant for. A very, very deep issue. A man, he's intimate with his wife, he travels, he comes back, or she's pregnant before, I wasn't with her. How is she pregnant? The ulama, they say that al-waladu lil firash. The child is to the bed. Meaning, if she's your bed under your marriage, that's your child. And if you have no truth, no proof, no evidence that it isn't your child, then that's your child, even if he looks like Brother Hazra. I'll tell you, moving forward. He says, and then he talks about an issue here. He says, وَإِذَا اشْتَرَكَ ثَلَاثَةٌ فِي وَطْءِ أَمَةٍ فِي طُهْرٍ مَلَكَهَا كُلُّ وَاحِدٍ مِنْهُمْ فِي طيب. Now we have the concept of, before we go that far, a zina. May Allah protect us from that, keep us far from that. The concept of the culture of zina. A major part of modern culture is zina. If you don't have a girlfriend, people will say that you're gay. If you're not chasing girls and running wild after every woman with two legs walking, something's wrong with you. You're a loser. Your life is this, blah, 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 etc. Major, major issue. Zina is the culture. We promote teens to have boyfriends and girlfriends. Sweet 16. Everyone understand this? A prom, a dance. Date before marriage, sex before marriage. You have to find out and you have to test it before you get married. That's the culture. Music. Need we say more? Movies. Need we say more? Sports. Need we say more? Soap operas. Every single aspect of life and culture today is going to be connected to zina, one way or another. And your sexual desires, let alone pornography and the scourge of pornography, whether it be magazines, books, whether it be the internet, websites, $billion industry, unfortunately. So the concept of having zina, making zina, having children, and now later on, alhamdulillah, you get into a really bad car accident, right? Or your friend gets stabbed really bad and they're in the hospital. Or your friend gets killed and shot and you go to the funeral. And that changes your life. You know what? I can't go to the club no more. I can't hang out no more. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to go and be in different college dorms making zina anymore. I want to be righteous. I want to be pious. So you make tawbah, you return to Allah, you accept Islam. But now you get a phone call saying, woman says, I'm pregnant. And it is your child. The first thing you're going to say is what? That's Hazra, not me. She says, no, it's you. Trust me. You get a DNA test and it's proven that what? It's your child. So what do you do now? Do you claim that child? Do you take care of the child? Do you go and see the child? Do you provide for the mother? Do you marry the mother? All right? It's easy for a person to say who's never been in that type of lifestyle, but someone who does come from that type of lifestyle, it's not that easy. A person says, once I wasn't a Muslim. I had Jahiliyyah. I had a girlfriend and I have children from Jahiliyyah. So what do you do now? Do you provide for them? Are you responsible for providing for them? Or is it haram because they aren't, or as brothers say, they're children of the bed? So this is a long issue. And I think that this issue needs to be studied and it needs to be researched with regards to what do people do who have children from premarital relations. Do we cut them off? What does that lead to? What example or message does that send to non-Muslims? What will happen if we allow someone to make zina, have a baby, have a child, and say, oh, it's a child of the bed, so I have nothing to do with it? It's a huge problem here, all right? Especially in urban cities. Moving forward. He then talks about an issue of a slave woman who has more than one master and more than one time, right? And what takes place and what happens if she becomes pregnant and she was with them in a time in which she was pure. She's no longer this person's slave. She becomes another person's slave. He had intercourse with her, etc. And they all claim that it's their child. They all claim that it's their child. Okay? And before we move forward within this chapter, I want to say something. And that is, many people today, they look at a child as being a burden and being a major headache and something that they're fearful of and afraid of. And you oftentimes read things like this in which the men are all claiming the child. You would say, why are they claiming the child? She's just a slave woman. If there were two other masters that she had, kalas, let them argue over it. It's not my child. But they're now actually coming and fighting and arguing for the child. The purpose of this is that back in those days, it was a blessing to have a child, let alone a son. And you can be married to a woman of noble birth, of high birth, of noble blood, and she may be barren. She doesn't produce a child for you. And that's a problem. Any great king, any prince, any great scholar, any great warrior, anybody, they want someone to be their heir. All men want a son that looks like them, that talks like them, that will bear their name and their lineage and carry on the next generation. So for a woman to bear a child, even if she was a slave, was a very serious thing. And there's no guarantee that you're going to have another son. Or the son comes, he's deformed. Huh? Or he's sick. Or he dies. But the child, the baby comes out strong, fat, chubby, healthy. Alhamdulillah, strong baby. That's a ni'mah. That's a blessing. And the people, they realize that. So I need this child. I want this child. Everyone understands? It's not like today, or, oh man, alhamdulillah, she was with somebody else. That's not my son then. It wasn't like that back in the day. Okay? And when you read the different histories of empires and dynasties, whether it were the Ottomans or the ancient Egyptians or the Chinese or whatever, you realize that many kings and emperors and sultans, they had harems. And the harems weren't just pleasure factories, but oftentimes they were baby factories. It was meant for the man, the sultan, to produce as many heirs as possible, as many strong warrior princes, as possible. And if that came from a woman of high birth, or if it came from a captured Russian slave, they cherished it and they valued it. And obviously the boy would follow his father in lineage and name and in prestige, and not his mother. Everyone understand this? So it is a tremendous issue here. A man having a child and him rushing and fighting over claiming that child. All right? So he says the solution is yuqra'u bainahum. He says, once again, they have to what? Draw straws, rock, paper, scissors. Whose son is it? Is it mine? Is it Abdur's? Or is it Hazra's? We have to what? We got to figure it out, whose baby it is. He says, and whoever wins the game of the straws, then he must pay a third. He says, thulutha, 2/3 of the diya. 2/3 of the diya to the other two men. How much is the diya? What is the diya? Inshallah, later in the book, we'll explain what a diya is, whether you call it blood money, the fee or retribution of manslaughter, accidental, etc. What happens, the different types of death and killing and manslaughter. And we have a diya. Someone's life is the full diya. Cutting off a person's nose, a person's ear, right? You injure someone, you get into a knife fight. I slash you with a knife and I cut your nose off. In Islamic legislation, how much of the diya do I have to pay? We get into a fight and I knee you in the groin, right? Muay Thai. A lot of brothers do. I knee you in the groin. And now, unfortunately, your private area doesn't work anymore. How much of the diya do I have to pay? You understand this? You go to a barbershop and a brother puts some type of cream or tonic on your beard and your beard falls out and it doesn't grow back anymore. How much of the what? Diya do you have to pay? There's a price for violating the sanctity and the sacredness of a human's body in Islam, the Muslim. So it's a price. So therefore he says, you take the baby, the son is yours, and you have to pay 2/3 of the diya for the what? Or the other two men. Everyone understand this? You have to recompensate them somehow in some way. All right? Last but not least is the concept of forensic evidence. Medical science. Is that used in the modern Sharia courts? Can that be used? In which there's no need to draw straws, or there's no need to say that this woman, that she was a firash. We have clear scientific evidence proving that this baby belongs to Hazra. Everyone understand this or not? Abdur. Everybody clear on this or not? What do we use this or not? It's very important. Now, the traditional texts versus modern science is going to be always, as we can see, a major issue of argumentation. A major issue of argumentation, faith versus science, sticking to the rules versus science, using the science along with the rules. It's going to be a long discussion. All right? Allah surely knows best. This is brief. That's the end of Kitab al-Nikah. For further clarification, go to the other classes, the other workshops. You have books, articles. Now you have the template for the most important rulings of marriage. Now you want to read the dalil for them? Go to the sharh of the book. In English, there is sharh. Go to the Sunan Abi Dawud and then Jami' Tirmidhi. Read the fatwa of the permanent committee of marriage and build upon what we've explained to you. Allah surely knows best. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.